Assalamu alaikum, sister. Thank you for writing to our live session. And inshallah, with Allah's mercy, I'll be able to help you with some input and a little bit of insight with what you have written. So, as I understand it, you've always been able to find answers, right, to questions or problems that have plagued you. You've always found, explanations and answers that were soothing to your heart and satisfied your quest for an explanation or knowledge. However, something happened to you a few years back that you describe as mysterious, and you keep wondering about it. And this happened, I think, when you were in the 9th grade, and you had a strange experience, and you're just trying to decipher this experience and trying to make sense of some of it anyhow. So you stated that about 5 years ago when you were in 9th grade, you remember that it was your first day of school and that you thought you had died. And your mother tried to wake you up and you couldn't wake up, and your mother took you for a bath maybe. You don't remember the water touching your body, but you remember being undressed and being placed in the bathtub. And you described it as if your soul was able to see what was happening to your body. And you compare that to, something that the dead is said to be able to experience. You stated that you could hear your brother talking to your mother, asking whether you had died. She, kept saying no, you were sleeping. She put you in the car after you were dressed. And at that point, I believe you woke up. When you did wake up, at least in your dream, in your mind, your brother told your mother that you had woken up, and he was very excited. And then they told you to go to school. So I guess you felt distraught and probably scared at the time. So before you left, you lashed out at your brother. And then you went to school. Sister, I'm not really sure about an experience like that. Obviously, I cannot give a definitive answer. I can only give like a hypothesis or a possible opinion, and that would be there are several different stages of sleep, right? And in some stages, like especially stage 1 and stage 2. We're so relaxed that we think we're awake, right? But we're not. We're actually asleep, and we're on our way to a deeper sleep. And that could be something that you experienced, like say when you were younger, and perhaps you were tired. Perhaps you were entering into that level of sleep and did not fully wake up, right? And perhaps the result of that was your interpretation of the experience as an out-of-body experience and something that you just cannot explain. And there are people who do sleepwalk as well, right? There's people who they fall asleep, but yet they can still get up in the middle of the night, go into the kitchen or walk down the street. It doesn't happen often, but there are people who do sleepwalk. And that's kind of what it sounded like when you were describing it. Although you weren't physically sleepwalking, but you had the consciousness and the type of awareness, like that distant awareness, right, of things going on around you, but you were not awake, if that makes sense. So if you want to look up sleepwalking, to get a little better understanding of what that is, that might help put this into perspective. I'm not saying that's what it was, but I'm just saying that might be an avenue you might want to explore, because that's kind of what it sounds like, that your mind, your brain was in that wavelength of possibly sleepwalking, or between stage 1 and stage 2 of sleeping. Another explanation would be perhaps that you were sick and you were on some medication, and that affected your perception and your ability, to get ready for school, and this and that, and perhaps your mother was helping you. I'm not really sure. But I would definitely want to, sit down with your mom when things are calm and she's in the mood to talk, and just, explain to her what you experienced, and just tell her that, this has really been bothering you, and, could she please, talk to you about this day. Inshallah, she'll be able to remember, and she'll be able to clarify things for you more, right? But it's kind of my feeling that as an isolated incident of that nature and of that clarity, it could have been, related to something like sleepwalking, or between stages 1 and 2 sleep cycle. So please look into that, and if you feel like it, just write us back and let me know what you think. I'd be interested in your analysis of that. You also mentioned that you feel like a stranger in this homeland. I'm not really sure where you're from, but I can imagine moving from one country to another is a huge change, right? If indeed that is what you have done. There's a lot to prepare. There's a lot to get used to. There's a lot of changes, right? If that is indeed the case, that you have moved from one homeland to another, perhaps you're having difficulty adjusting, and that's also affecting your mental health and your perception of things. Now, you mentioned that this year you had failed all of your exams, even though you're an excellent student. And sister, I'm wondering why that happened. You described that you felt like life was against you, and that no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't, achieve your goals. And then reading further, you're, discussing how teachers laughed at you. You felt ashamed of yourself. You mentioned certain behaviors were strange, and I'm wondering, if you, in the future, if you write again, if you could clarify what strange behaviors were going on. And as a result of that, you became depressed and restless. You tried to run away from home and school, and you also stated that some of your teachers were abusive towards you verbally and physically. That is really horrendous, right? I see you live in Saudi Arabia, and I'm not sure what the policies are or the laws there as far as physical and verbal abuse of children in school, but usually, globally, by no means is physical abuse of children accepted anywhere, right? I mean, that's child abuse. And if you're being abused, it needs to be reported, and the abuse needs to stop, and you need to be removed from the toxic environment that you're in. Okay, but again, I don't know the laws pertaining to Saudi, and I do apologize for that, but I will say that I'm so sorry that you were abused. You should have never been abused. Allah did not create you to be abused or oppressed. Okay, and that's what abuse is, that's oppression as well. Right? And no child should be abused. That is a sin, and it's appallable. Moving forward with your life, you tried to be patient and still show respect, but you couldn't understand the reason for all what was happening to you. And this resulted in suicidal thoughts and desire to self-harm. You also had depression, along with suffering with family problems. You stated you had no friends, and life kept going downhill for you at this point. Sister, I'm wondering, when you had suicidal thoughts, what happened? Did you tell anybody? Was there any intervention for the desire to self-harm? Did you actually self-harm, or did you just think about it? The suicidal thoughts, do you still have them? And if so, have you told anybody? Have you confided in your mom or a friend? I know you state you don't have any friends, but maybe a sister, somebody. Please do write us back and let us know where you are with your mental health at this current time, and if you have sought counseling for all of this trauma that you've been through and for the depression and suicidal ideation. I sincerely hope that you have since gotten help and gotten treatment for that. If not, sister, I implore you to please seek out a counselor in your area who can work with you, who is compassionate and has empathy and love, right? And is really concerned about your well-being and your happiness. Somebody who lives near you, that's easy to get to, because I'm not sure, what your situation is with being able to travel or, things like that. So, please do seek out somebody in your area just for an assessment and somebody to talk to and to begin your healing journey with, right? I just want to mention that you are very important, sister, and you're loved, and you're a wonderful Muslim, and a very smart and beautiful young woman, and Allah loves you very much, and Allah wants to see you happy, and you didn't deserve the abusive treatment that you have received. Right? So I just want you to understand that. You did not deserve that. And that is haram. It's haram. So with that said, I'm moving forward with your dream, okay? You had a second experience where you and your teacher were standing in a classroom, and it was empty, and a light was coming in from outside, and you were facing each other. And in this dream, but it seems like both you and your teacher were happy. You both wore nicer clothes. Perhaps you were a bit more grown, older. But it was a good feeling, and it was calm, and it was quiet. Neither of you said anything, but it was a few moments of peace, right? So sometimes, sister, like when there's a lot of chaos in one's life, a lot of stress or loneliness, and like really nowhere to turn, sometimes people will daydream. They will go into a state of mind where they just go someplace else. They go someplace else where it's much more peaceful, less complications, and more serenity, right? So perhaps that's why you had this dream or vision, like standing with your teacher. Perhaps you feel safe with him, right? But standing with your teacher in the classroom and just feeling calm and quiet and peaceful and happy, right? Because if people can't find peace and happiness in their real life, in reality, and there's a lot of trauma and chaos surrounding them and toxicity, a lot of times, people will start to daydream or go into states of mind where, they envision, more natural, more conducive, more peaceful, loving environments. So that possibly may be what is going on, and even possibly despite switching between sleep states or sleepwalking in your first experience, this may have happened, right? Where your mind just kind of withdrew and you kind of retreated and took a break and you just, chilled out, right? For lack of a better term. I have heard this happening to other people, And yes, it was usually a result of a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, much more than what you've described here. Although what you have described here is profound, especially with the physical and verbal abuse from the teachers and people laughing at you and you feeling ashamed and all the things that you felt and went through. That's traumatizing in itself. However, people, who have gone through that plus a lot more can and have gone into altered states of mind, right? Where they just remove themselves from the situation and have a vision or a dream of somewhere that's much nicer, right? And it seems like reality. It feels like it's real. And who knows, maybe for that moment it is. But yeah, so I mean, I've heard of this happening. I'm not saying this is what it is, but what I can kindly suggest, my dear sister, is that, you do get counseling and that you do get an assessment done, just to rule out anything else that may be going on, right? Especially because of the suicide ideation and the desire to self-harm, and just because of your situation where you're, really isolated as far as friends go in a social life, and the abuse that you're going through. Yeah, I think that, inshallah, if you're willing, I just hope that you seek out counseling where you live and get an assessment and start, to begin to understand what's going on. Because it sounds like possibly, you're just trying to escape a situation mentally and visually, right? By going into like altered states, possibly. But I'm not saying that's what it is. You seem very creative, very intelligent young lady. And I am sure that inshallah, with the right questions and participating in counseling, you'll get your answers. And a therapist, a counselor, right, that you work with has the tools, right, and the assessments and the ability to take all of what you're telling me and do a complete exam and give you some concrete opinions and answers, as well as results as to what you may be going through. And inshallah, I think that will answer a lot of your questions. But in the meantime, I hope that some of the tips and some of the possible, hypotheses that I presented for you to explore, you may find helpful. We wish you the best.